Today, I am excited to share a story with you. This is a story that's adapted from the Pull Together Morning, which is a story from Tanzania. And so we do hear some Swahili words in this story. I bet you'll be able to hear them too. In the beginning of the world, there was no sun in the sky. Darkness covered everything. People fell into holes, bumped into one another, and fought constantly. Lion called a meeting of all the people, but as crocodile, antelope, leopard, hyena, fly, elephant, spider, and so many more people came together, they jostled and argued until Crocodile finally roared, "Listen, if we are going to survive this darkness, we must remember that, different as we are in this together." A hush fell. Then Antelope spoke, "Harambe, pull together." Everyone nodded and grunted their approval. Harambe, pull together. Leopard began to think aloud. Sometimes when it rains, the sky cracks open. There's light on the other side. If only we could reach it. Hyena laughed. And how would we get there? And even if we could, Elephant added, we are far too big to fit through a crack. Mouse nudged Spider and tapped Fly's wing. "We're not," she said. Then louder, "Spider, Fly, and I will go." The big animals cheered, and Lion promised to stay behind, making music to guide them home. So Spider went about. She spun a silver ladder to the sky. Mouse gnawed a small hole at the top, and the three slipped through to the land of the Sky People. They were found by the Sky People immediately and brought before the Sky King. The problem was the Sky King didn't really want to share his light, but he also didn't want to come off as rude or cruel. So he told them, "I will test you, and if you pass the test, I will give you light." But the Sky King had other plans to make sure that he didn't have to give them light. Luckily, Fly secretly listened as the king spoke to the Sky People. "We can't give these people light," said the king. "I've come up with a test that they will surely fail." Fly slipped back to Mouse and Spider and shared the news right before the Sky King returned. "Friends," said the king to the three small animals, "my people need grass for their roofs. You may have light if, and only if, you cut down all the grass in this field by morning." The king smiled smugly. Mouse smiled back. "Thank you for your generosity, O king. We will do it." "What do you mean we'll do it?" cried Fly when the king had gone away. "We're never going to be able to cut all that grass." Mouse thought for a moment. "Yes," she said. "Harambe, I'll be right back." Soon she returned in the company of the ants. "Harambe," yelled the queen of the ants, and by morning not a single stalk of grass stood in the field. When the Sky King returned the next morning, he was surprised. "Well, I see you've passed the test," he said. "Congratulations. Since you've passed the test, I must call another meeting with the Sky People." Fly once again took his silent place on the wall, and while the king spoke, the king was furious. "These small people are strong," he fumed. "I can see we're going to have to give them light, but I'm going to make it hard for them." Fly buzzed back and told his friends the king's plan. "He's got 2 boxes," exclaimed Fly. The black one has darkness in it. The red box has light. He's going to make us pick. Just then, the king burst through the curtain with the 2 boxes. "You must choose," he said. Mouse pretended to think, Then quickly, before the king could change his mind, she grabbed the red box and raced for the hole in the sky. Mouse, spider, and fly plunged down the silver ladder into the waiting, music-making crowd below. "We've pulled together, all of us," Mouse said in her loudest voice, "and we've brought you light in this box." But out of the box came not light at all. Instead, Rooster jumped out of the box. Mouse felt her cheeks grow hot. Rooster was not light. She had been tricked by the Sky King. The people began to protest. At that moment, Rooster threw back his head. "Ha ha ha, Harambe!" he called out. "Ha ha ha, Harambe!" At once, the eastern sky filled with color. Pink and yellow, it glowed, and then the sun popped fiery red in the sky. That's how it was on that very first golden, pulled-together morning. And Rooster has been calling up to the sky to get the sun out for us ever since. Ha ha ha, Harambe!
Good morning, friends. This might be a silly question to ask when we have the sun shining right here through the windows, but by a show of hands, can I see who here has at any part of their life been afraid of the dark? I absolutely am, still am. For as long as I can remember, I have been uncomfortable with that feeling of being in the dark. Even when I'm at home, in my coziest clothes, just walking from one dark room to another, and I know that everything is safe and fine, I just don't like that feeling of being in the dark. And I appreciate seeing everyone else who put their hands up. It's reassuring that I'm not alone in that feeling, that many of us can relate to that feeling of fear of the dark. I'm thinking about this, of course, today because, mathematically speaking, today is the day of the year with the most darkness. Today, on December 21st, 2025, at precisely 10:03 a.m., about an hour ago, the Earth reached the point in its orbit when the northern hemisphere is the furthest tilted away from the sun, shortening our day here in Boston to just 9 hours, which you can really feel when it goes up against the 15 hours of nighttime that we will experience tonight. We call this day the winter solstice, a word that comes to us from the Latin meaning the sun standing still. Just like when a runner turns around and runs back the way they came, there's a split second in that turn where they seem to stand still. And in the same way, we are in that split second when the days stop getting shorter and are about to start getting longer. Just like a fear of the dark, a recognition of this moment is one of the most universal experiences across all of human history and all human cultures. As long as there have been people to tell stories, there have been stories that wrestle with the meaning of why sometimes there is sun and why sometimes there is not. Just now, you heard from Sophia one of these stories, which comes to us from Tanzania, a story about what brought the sun in the first place. The story begins with a world that had no sun at all, which all the animals agreed was terrible. And so they embarked on a journey to bring the sun to our skies. And it turned out that it did not require any individual animal, but it had to be done by all of the animals coming together, pulling together, Harambe. They all brought their unique gifts and ways of being in the world to this problem, and they succeeded. The sun then is associated with community, with something that is more than the sum of its parts. When all of us pull together, we are so much more. And so that, of course, makes sense why on this solstice Sunday we are all here together, with the sun gleaming brightly in the windows for its few hours in the sky, is something that we wish to all gather together to celebrate. Harambee. But of note, in the story of the pull-together morning, is that the moment that brought the animals together was not in the daylight. No, the animals gathered in the darkness. The fact that it was dark was the reason that brought them together and taught them the meaning of all pulling together. And as all good stories do, there are multiple layers of meaning. The story took on additional meaning during the independence movement in Tanzania when two previous colonial nations, Tanganyika and Zanzibar, merged to form the new independent Tanzania. And they bonded over a shared Swahili language and culture that transcended the colonially drawn borders. The process was one of unity and solidarity that took a great deal of time and hard work. So in the context of all that, when the story is told today, the pull together morning is not just talking about that first morning, it's the story of every single morning. The night and the dark is the time when we pull together to understand what the goals are that we hope to achieve, and the day symbolizes the joyous celebration of this unity. In this understanding, the solstice, a time when we are facing more night than we otherwise do, is a time when we really do feel a reason to pull together even more closely than we would otherwise. That we pull together like the animals who worked together to bring us the sun. Incidentally, this also points to one of the best remedies to a fear of the dark. Because even though I say that I am afraid of the dark, what I think I actually mean to say by that is that I am afraid of being alone in the dark. It is much harder to feel that fear when surrounded by friends, family, community, and loved ones. Even in total darkness, if I know that I am in that darkness with the people that matter to me, it is much easier to understand the darkness for the harmless and natural state that it is, and that it's possible to pull together for the morning that is to come. I'd like to share another solstice story with you. This one comes to us from Polynesia, from the islands spanning the Pacific Ocean. Now, the main character of this story is the demigod Maui, who by this point is already a pretty big deal. He's pretty famous. At one point, he cast his fish hook out into the ocean, and it caught onto a rock right at the bottom. But instead of letting go of his fishing line, he pulled harder and harder, and he paddled his boat backwards and kept pulling, and eventually the rock and the whole ocean floor came up, and that is how the Hawaiian Islands were formed. And then on islands all over the Pacific Ocean, there were people, but they had a difficult time cooking their food. And so Maui went to the fire keeper and received a little piece of the essence of fire, which Maui went and he hid under the bark of all the trees on the islands to keep it safe and hidden from the wind. And he taught the Polynesian people that there was a trick to bring it back out, where if you take a stick and you rub it in a really specific way against the bark of those trees, you could bring the fire out and then cook your food over it. All this is to say, Maui was a big deal and had already been known for someone who could do just about anything, and he was known for wanting to help anyone whom he could. And one day, Maui was walking through a town, and he saw his mother, Hina, struggling with her work. She was trying to make kapa, a cloth made from drying and felting plant fibers. But this was a time-consuming process, and by the time she got to the drying part of the process, the sun was already setting. The days were very short. There would be no warmth and light to finish the process. And Maui saw this, and he asked if there was a problem, and Hina said, "Oh yes, the sun, called Tama Nui Atera, makes this way so quickly across the world that my cloth cannot dry, the plants cannot ripen, and the fishermen can barely paddle to deep water before the darkness comes again. Is there anything that can be done?" Safe to say, slowing down the sun is an ambitious project for anyone. But this was Maui, after all, the one who fished up an entire island chain from the seafloor. So if there was anyone capable of this, it would be him. And so Maui took a close look at the sun, I'm sure with proper eye protection. Please don't look at the sun if you're not a Polynesian demigod. But he realized that there were rays coming out of the sun. And the longer that he looked at those rays, he realized that they were legs. They were the legs that the sun was using to sprint across the sky. And so Maui realized that, and he made a lasso out of the toughest rope that he could find. And he tied one end to the strongest, most deep-rooted tree that he could find. And he swung the lasso over his head faster and faster and flung it out at the sun's legs, trapping many of them in a tangle of rope. So the sun screeches to a halt and turns angrily to Maui and wants to know what he's doing. And Maui responds by saying, "You are not properly doing your job. You sprint across the sky so fast that my mother's cloth cannot dry and the plants cannot ripen and the fishermen can barely paddle to deep water before the sun comes down." And the sun hears this and listens. And so a deal is made. For half the year, the sun, Tama Nui Atera, will cross the sky a little more slowly and give all of its warmth and light to the people of the islands so that they can get their work done for everything that they need the sun for. And then for the other half of the year, the sun would go fast and the days would be short, and the people agreed that this was going to be a time to rest from their hard work. And that is how Maui captured the sun. Now, this isn't part of the traditional story, but when I hear this, I have to imagine that there is a balance in the sun's time across the world. After all, if all the days were long on one side of the earth, that means they were necessarily short on another. So Maui knew that negotiating for long summer days every day would leave other people with only the winter. And so to make this agreement, this compromise work, all the people had to agree that when the days are shortest, those would be set aside for rest and reflection. I love thinking about the winter solstice as this time of rest and reflection. Of course, the demands of working or being in school means we can't tangibly change our working conditions necessarily, but nevertheless, there is an invitation to think about this time of year differently than we do of the sunnier parts. Perhaps to take our rest and reflection more seriously this time of year. In our household, we have this tradition where we write down 13 wishes on little strips of paper, and then starting the night before solstice, we take one at random and we burn it. And we do that again every night. We take a piece of paper that has a wish on it and we burn it. And then on New Year's Day, we're left with one. And that's the one that is going to be our responsibility to take care of in the coming year. The other 12, the universe is going to help us with. But that one, that's our job. That's our responsibility. And the solstice is an invitation to take this time of year to have those sorts of reflections. The ones that are more suited to a time of year when we are naturally encouraged to gather in community and focus on our rest, as was made clear in the deal that Maui made with the sun. Now, we will be winding down our worship today with a hymn, We Three Kings. Now, admittedly, that is more of a Christmas song than a solstice song. You don't have to pull up the books now. It's still going to be like just a few minutes. But I wanted to explain why we are singing it on this solstice. Because when we were planning out the music for this, we had a great conversation with Joe. And Joe mentioned there was one line in the song that really grabbed him. Star of wonder, star of light, guide us with thy perfect light. And I thought that was so beautiful because it reminds me of one other really important thing to remember about the solstice. I've been repeatedly talking about this day as the darkest of the year. And while it is true that this is the day with the least amount of sunlight, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely dark either. Once the sun goes down, the world is filled with all different sorts of light. There is, of course, starlight, only visible when the lamps and the sun graciously bow out of the way to allow it to shine through. As we're about to sing in the We Three Kings hymn, this is a type of light that will be celebrated a lot this week. There is also moonlight, another source of light subject to cycles and changes, rising and falling like the sun. But maybe most importantly, there is the light that each of us put out into the world. When we put our mind to it, we are able to provide many of the things that we otherwise look to the sun's light for. We can make others feel warm and held through our actions and our words, especially when things are at their coldest or most difficult. We can, just like bright sunlight shining down from the sky, help illuminate the way when people dear to us are feeling lost or searching for the way forward, and on the days when we ourselves find ourselves in most need of warmth of that light, even when the sun is deep under the horizon, we are able to find it in the stars, in the moon, in the people dear to us, perhaps the people around us in this very moment. The winter solstice may be the most sunless day of the year, but instead of this being a moment where we fear the dark the most, perhaps it can be the day where we fear the dark the least. We recognize the ways in which the dark is something that comes around as a natural result of the light, where we reflect on the year we had and the year to come. And when we recognize our own ability to fill the world with light. So on this solstice, on this day where the sun seems to stand still, let us fill the dark with light and with singing. May it be so.